Today let's take a deep dive into using textures in your mocks. It's really one simple step that can actually really drastically improve the way that you build. Basically, it's the idea of just finding parts that have unique surfaces, unique shapes, or edges that can help make a mock look a lot more realistic and really allow it to achieve the desired look that you're aiming for. So let's examine a few examples of mocks that use textures really well, and additionally we'll break down some of the pieces that they use so that you could do something similar. This first mock here is Temple in the Jungle of Celestia by Jonas Wide. So this mock here is really effectively using some stone or brick-like textures on this mock. And he's simply doing so through a lot of different pieces, whether that's masonry bricks or a combination of tiles and studs, and implementing all of those together with a few bricks and plates here and there, and just the repeated use of different shapes and different pieces here can achieve this more realistic brick texture. Yes, you could very easily build this using your plain basic bricks, but using these individual pieces really helps to bring out a more realistic brick-like look. Additionally, interspersing olive green pieces in with the light bluish grey bricks really helps to take this from a brick-like texture into a mossy brick-like texture. And you can very effectively convey that this is an old, aged temple where moss and vines and things are starting to grow everywhere. You combine that as well with a little bit of foliage and plants, and you've got a beautiful, fantastic looking mock. And that's one of the beauties of textures. It's the little things like that that can really take it to another level, and it's as simple as just finding pieces that match the aesthetic that you're looking for. And masonry bricks, well, they're perfect for those brick wall textures, as well as all these other pieces thrown in there. But that's one example of a brick wall texture. Let's take a look at another one. This mock is by Jed Cameron and is called A Lord's Manor. So again, this is another brick wall texture, but this one's a little different to what we saw before. Again, it is using some of those masonry bricks. It's also using some studs and some plates and some other bricks, so it's done in a similar fashion, but additionally what's being used here that wasn't used as much in the last mock is a bunch of snot bricks or headlight bricks combined with a few ingot pieces, some plates and some tiles. So these types of pieces, using them in this fashion, these are some snot techniques. Snot stands for studs not on top, and it allows you to have this awesome texture where the bricks really jut out of the design, and you start to get a bit of depth in the design. So it's only a subtle difference, and it's using a few different pieces here, but I think it's always really important to note that there's more than one way of building something. It's important to do a bit of research, look into what other builders have done, and also just experiment with different pieces, because there's always going to be a different way that you can build a specific texture or achieve a different look when you're designing a mock. And I think these two mocks here are a great example of that. Let's move on to the next mock here. This is by Joxon and it's called Akiyama Sidewinder GT. So this mock is a beautiful example of contrasting textures. We take a look at the beautiful cyberpunk bike that this mock is riding here. It uses a lovely combination of very smooth textures and very industrial mechanical textures. All the different panels and bionicle pieces used here have naturally got a more smoother look to them. So pairing up a lot of pieces that naturally have a smoother look to them, you get a nice smooth texture that looks almost similar to a car. Beautiful, smooth, agile lines that gives a sense of speed. Additionally, some of these more mechanical pieces here, your tubing elements, and a few other sort of smaller nitty-gritty kind of pieces, helps to create a more engine-like look to show that this is a more mechanical motorbike of sorts, or a hover bike in this sense. But what I think is so cool is the rider on top of this bike here is also using some smoother textures. We take a look at the legs on this mock here. The brick elements naturally have a smooth texture to them, but it's very different to the smoother textures we saw before. The system pieces are a little bit more blocky, whereas the Technic and Bionicle pieces used on the bike naturally have more of a curvature to them. So as a result, you're able to really differentiate the two elements on this mock. The bike is a very different element, and the rider is a very different element because the textures are contrasting. So maybe you're building a desert temple, and so you've got tan sand, but the building temple that you're making is also tan. Sometimes that can get a little bit confusing. Where does the sand end and the building start because you're playing with the same colors? Well, if you have contrasting textures like this mock does here, you're able to really differentiate the two elements. And also just having contrasting textures naturally just looks nice and is aesthetically pleasing. So it's really cool to see a mock here that's playing with multiple different textures all at once, and they're working in unison together. This is a little bit more of an advanced way of looking at textures, but I figured I'd point it out now because it's certainly something you can learn from. Let's take a look at another example of playing around with smoother textures. This is a mock by Jafer and it's called Caddick. So a bunch of these repeated elements here, these Exoforce robot arms and other tail elements being repeated in this fashion, again, naturally they have a smoother look to them. And so when they're repeated like this, you get this lovely flowing look to it. Additionally, all of these Technic, Hero Factory, and Bionicle pieces naturally have a smoother look to them. When building a mock, it's not as simple as just combining a whole bunch of different pieces in the same color. You also have to pay attention to the actual look of the elements. If one element has a very rough, jagged look to it, but the other one is smoother, possibly in those circumstances, they won't work well together. It depends on the look you're achieving. Maybe you want that contrast. But often it's wise to partner pieces with other parts that have similar textures so that there's a nicer sense of cohesion and unity throughout the mock. And this here's a great example of that. A simple way around that is just repeating similar elements, like we see on the neck of this mock, or just making sure to really study your pieces so that you get parts that have similar textures. Onto the final mock here. This is by Simon Liu and is called Griebel World. So Griebels are a texture you very typically see in Star Wars and other sci-fi creations and different art forms across pop culture. Griebels refer to the very mechanical looking details, much like you see on this mock here. You can very effectively achieve that look with system pieces, and I'll throw up a whole bunch of different pieces that you could look into here, but really anything with sort of bars or more mechanical looking details or little grills or small lines to it, that sort of stuff is perfect for Griebels. The smaller the better as well. So if you really want to pack in that space-like detail or that really nitty-gritty mechanical look, Griebels are definitely something to consider. So that's been a whole bunch of different ways of approaching textures on a mock. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought when you want to use textures in future mocks. Additionally, if you're looking for a few more tips and tricks when building with your bricks, head on over to Tips&Bricks over on Facebook and Instagram. They post daily LEGO content over there that is sure to help you with your future building endeavors. Additionally, check out the playlist on my channel for all the other Tips and Bricks videos that I've done. You'll learn a lot from those as well. Additionally, check the links in the description below to all the mocks you saw in today's episode, and be sure to check out some of the other creations those people have made. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.